Welcome to Storytime, etc. We try to post scary stories every day, so please subscribe and hit the bell button to get notified.
Story 1. The Room with the Train, True. This story is not about a ghost, or an encounter with a creepy stranger. It's not even about a near-death experience or something like that. As a matter of fact, I was never in danger during the event I'm about to tell you about. Nonetheless, it's a disturbing memory that I will carry with me until the day I die. I grew up in a small city, the kind of place you could barely call a town if it wasn't for the sheer number of people living there. Downtown was only a couple of blocks long, and in the middle of it was one of the biggest buildings in the area. It was the local movie theater, named after the city. I remember going there when I was very young, about 7 years old, and watching the first Pokemon movie. It was probably nothing compared to the theaters we have nowadays, but back then it was huge for me. I loved it. So when a few years later I heard the cinema was going out of business, I felt really sad about it. The building was sold to a religious group that used it for their services. You know the type. Loud music, big crowds with their arms in the air singing prayers, some having seizures on stage while the pastor yells through a mic. Every time I walked past the old cinema, I would see the announcements of the congregation where the movie posters would have been, and if they were in session, you could hear them singing from the other side of the street. This group owned the cinema for nearly a decade, until the local government bought back the building in order to restore it as a historic landmark of the city. When this happened, I was studying construction, with the intent to follow architecture or civil engineering at college, and my class was very lucky to be involved with the cinema's restoration project because 2 of our teachers were architects working on it. I will always remember the day we went to visit the old cinema. Our class was small, only a handful of students, but we were all around the same age, so we all shared childhood memories of when the cinema was operational. We ran through the corridors of the auditorium, sat in the chairs just like we did when we were little kids, and began stomping on the wooden floor with our feet, filling the entire room with the echoes of our drumming and our laughters, a little ritual, or sorts everyone used to do right before the beginning of the movie. Once nostalgia time was over, we went back to the purpose of the trip, and began to survey the building. We were very excited because that was a unique opportunity to go into the places we would have never been allowed to otherwise, so we made sure to check every last corner, every single room. No matter how far, no matter how obscure. The first one we found was below the stage. On one of the corners there was a little door, not very visible, probably because it was meant for maintenance staff only. Behind it we found a long room filled with rusty boilers, part of the old heating system that was no longer in use. The place was a little creepy, with all of those old tanks and pipes crowding the narrow space, but what we found past them was what really started to freak us out. This room was small, very small. It was, after all, basically just leftover space behind the boilers. Yet it contrasted so much with the rest of the area around it, it may as well have been from a different place altogether. The walls were painted a light color, white I think, but I don't remember it very well because what really got my attention were the drawings in them. There were rainbows, a smiling sun, trees and flowers, and happy little people with smiles on their faces of dotted eyes. It was a daycare. The whole class and teacher gathered to see the discovery. We were all very confused about the strange placing of this room. Okay, we could understand the need for a place to keep the kids that were too little to be amongst the crowd during prayers, or maybe the ones of the people who worked there, but the placing was just odd. The stage was probably one of the loudest places in the auditorium during the services, and this was right below it, so there was no way it could be a quiet place for the children. We left the boilers room and continued our tour through the theater, a little puzzled about our finding but not giving it too much thought. Outside of the auditorium there were the bathrooms, both in terrible condition, the ticket sale booth, and a huge set of stairs that led to a mezzanine in the auditorium. Half of the seats there were totally ruined due to a water leak in the roof, and I cursed these people for not taking proper care of the building. With that part done, all that was left was the projection room on the 3rd floor. Behind the tickets booth there was a door that led to a spiral stair. I don't remember how tall it actually was, but it must have been over 10 meters of metallic steps without a single resting spot. I wasn't exactly an athlete, but I could walk several kilometers with no problem, and rode on a bike to and from school every single day. Yet by the time I reached the top of the stairs, I was exhausted. And I wasn't the only one. All of my classmates complained about how hard it was to walk up there. After a short break to catch our breath, we moved on to explore the third floor. It was roughly a narrow passageway with a couple of divisions to form different rooms, but it was more than enough for what it was made for. The first room from the stairs was a storage deposit, probably where they kept the movies and other equipment, and except for some trash it was mostly empty. The second room was the one we were all excited to see, the projector room. The old machine was so big that it was still there, and there were even some pieces scattered around. It was quite a piece of history, and we were all very thrilled to check it out, so no one really bothered to move on to the very last room until we were about to leave. And there we saw it again. After a short break to catch our breath, we moved on to explore the third floor. It was roughly a narrow passageway with a couple of divisions to form different rooms, but it was more than enough for what it was made for. The first room from the stairs was a storage deposit, probably where they kept the movies and other equipment, and except for some trash it was mostly empty. The second room was the one we were all excited to see, the projector room. The old machine was so big that it was still there, and there were even some pieces scattered around. It was quite a piece of history, and we were all very thrilled to check it out, so no one really bothered to move on to the very last room until we were about to leave. And there we saw it again. We never visited the theater again, even though we continued with the restoration project for several months, and we never talked about those two rooms. Cases of molestation in the church are well known by everyone, to the point that the pedo priest is practically a cliché. But this is the kind of thing you think happens in some place far away, in another city, even in another country. You never imagine it can happen in the very same town you live. The place where you grew up. In the very same building where you once watched a Pokemon movie when you were 7 years old.
Story 2. White glowing eyes, true. The following is a very true experience. I've never actually wrote this down before, and I don't know if anyone has experienced this too. This happened between 1989 and 1990, and I was about the age of 4 years old. To this day I still get chills thinking about it, and I wonder if in some way unknown, it changed me. My parents had a house in the Inland Empire of Southern California, and at the time my brother hadn't been born yet, so I was still the only child. To give you a layout, my parents' house was a 2-story house located in a cul-de-sac. On the bottom floor there was 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, the living room and the kitchen. The second floor was just the master bedroom and bath. All you could see from the street was the garage and one of the bedroom windows on the bottom floor and the window of my mom's bathroom on the second floor. To get to the front door you had to walk along the cement pathway that ran along the side of the house. You had to pass the first bedroom that you can see from the street, then you pass the bathroom window and then another bedroom window, and then you would be at the front door. The backyard was beyond that point. My bedroom at the time was the bedroom next to the front door. Now for some reason, my blinds weren't completely down to the bottom of the window. There was about a 6-inch gap with nothing covering it. I was pretty young, so I didn't really care much about it then. The bed was in the middle of the wall across from my bedroom door, and to the left was the window. According to my mom, this all happened right before midnight. My mother was asleep in her room upstairs, and my dad was a policeman that worked nights in another city. I was fast asleep in my room, and out of nowhere I suddenly awoke, looking up at the ceiling. I don't know what woke me or if I just popped awake on my own. After my eyes adjusted to the night's light of my bedroom, I sat up and started looking around my room. All of a sudden something caught my eye at the window, in the gap. First, I thought it was the street light reflecting on the window. But I knew for a fact that there was only one street light, and what I was looking at was 2 obvious glowing spots that were spaced apart as if on someone's face. Then I thought, is that a cat looking at me? And yes, I vividly remember thinking these things, trying to debunk this at 4 years old. I had remembered then that my cat Chelsea's eyes would reflect at night. But this looked different than that. The cat's eyes would almost have different colors when reflecting. These were 2 very solid, bright white glowing eyes, looking straight at me. I just stared at them, frozen stiff, trying to make sense of what I'm seeing. I couldn't see a face at all. The eyes were just so bright, nothing else stood out. That void or face around the eyes looked blacker than the night. I thought again, well, if this is a cat, how could a cat be big like a person, and why would a cat stand up to stare in my bedroom? The curiosity got me and I went for it. I flipped my covers off, turned my little 4-year-old body towards the window and put my feet on the floor. This is the moment the creepiest thing happened, and it will forever be burned into my brain. I got off the bed and got on my knees to get a closer look at this so-called cat. When at this very moment, this faceless pair of glowing white eyes begins to slowly and steadily tilt to the side, very similar to Michael Myers in Halloween, eyes still locked on me. Not blinking once. The feeling of dread and fear shot through my body. Completely terrified, I burst into tears immediately and booked it down the hallway, through the living room and up the stairs to tell my mom. Although I was going as fast as I could, it felt like it took forever. When I got to my mom, I was so upset, I couldn't get any words out. Tears were streaming down my face and my mom was becoming seriously concerned at this point. She was able to calm me down just enough for me to get out the words, "There is white eyes looking at me through my window, on the bottom." Stutter, crying hard. "Are you sure?" my mom asked. I cry out, "Yes." She didn't even go down to look, she just called the police. I don't remember the time it took for them to arrive or what they said because I finally fell asleep in my mom's bed. I do remember faintly waking up to a knock on the door and my mom going to open it. The cop speaks to her and I hear her say, "Okay, thank you, good night." And she shuts the door. "Did they find it, mommy?" I asked, half asleep. "No, honey," he said, "they couldn't find anyone." My mom told me softly, "It's okay now, just try to go back to sleep." It's safe to say that the next day, my whole window was covered. Years fast forward and I'm in middle school now. Every now and then I would think about that night. Sometimes I wondered if that moment was real, if those eyes were really there. Those unforgettable white eyes. One day a random thought came up and I asked my mom if she remembered that night. She tells me, "Yes, of course, why?" "I don't know, just wondering, I guess," I said. Then my mom proceeds to say, "Well, I never told you this, but when the deputy came out that night, he told me they made it a priority to get out to our house as soon as they could because not very long before I called 911 they received another call from someone else reporting that someone was looking in their window. In our same neighborhood." Hearing that sent chills down my spine and to this day I wonder who or what was looking at me that night.
Story 3. The Girl in the Mirror. I was about the age of 13 when this story took place. I lived in an old house just on the outside of a large city, and was surrounded by cornfields and forests. I had lived there all of my life before this happened. It was a dreary, summer night, which is mostly normal for the place I live. But on this particular night, something just felt off. I had came home from soccer practice around 6 p.m. and my parents always had me in bed by 8. The night went on as usual. I ate dinner, played with my little sister, and did some weightlifting before bed. I got into bed around 7:45. This story will better make sense if I tell you some things about me. I'm a restless sleeper. I toss and turn and get up periodically through the night. And I've always had a fascination with the afterlife. Okay, back to the story. I'm not sure exactly what time I fell asleep, but I didn't really have my usual episodes through the night. This was the first night I slept peacefully in years. I was suddenly awoken by a strange noise coming from the bathroom in my bedroom. Since I had to use the bathroom anyways, I decided to go check it out. I thought it might be a mouse or a bat since we live in the country and the house is old and has holes in the older walls. I went in the bathroom, I didn't see anything, so I proceeded on my way to pee. After peeing, I washed my hands and face, and when I was washing my face I looked up at the large mirror that overhangs my sink. Since there was still water in my eyes, my vision is blurry and I couldn't really see much. But I thought I saw something behind me, but I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I dried my face off and looked up at the mirror again. Right behind me, there was a little girl, clutching my body, almost as if she was hiding from something. Her ghostly outline scared me at first, but as I kept looking, I could tell that whatever was scaring her was coming from the basement. So I walked to my basement door and I opened it slightly at first cause I was very scared of what might be behind it. This being said, I've lived in this house my entire life, and have never been in the basement. My dad mentioned to me that it had 3 separate parts all separated by small windows that you could barely fit through. So I walked down the basement steps and got down to the bottom where the light switch was. I turned it on, and all seemed like it was okay. That's until I heard what sounded like crying from one of the other parts of the basement. In my mind, I was thinking, fuck this shit, but in my heart I knew I had to see what it was. So I ventured through the part of the basement and the light couldn't reach the other side where the other room was. It was pitch black. I still heard the crying, but since it was so dark I couldn't see anything. Something gave me the urge to go to the far corner of the room because the way the moonlight reflected off of the floor, you could kind of see with the little light you had. I walked over to the corner and stared directly in the middle of the room. There, in the middle of the room, was a chair. It had shackles for the feet and what looked like to be some type of restraint for arms or something like that. That's when I noticed that there was someone sitting in that chair. I walked closer, only to reveal that it was the same little girl ghost that had been crying previously in the bathroom. She was also crying there, and had needles stuck in her arms, draining some type of fluid into her. All was quiet till she started screaming. It was so high-pitched I thought it sounded like a siren, or something of that nature. She was saying words but I couldn't make out anything she was saying. Until she spoke 5 menacing words that made my heart sink. She said, "Get out. Daddy is coming." Not even thinking twice, I sprinted up the basement stairs, tripping over my own feet and fell flat on my face once I reached the top. I got back up and ran to my parents' room. I told them what happened. They went down there and checked everything out. I told them about the chair and the little girl that was screaming. They told me that there was no chair in the basement and that there had never been 3 parts of the basement. Me not believing them, I walked back down there, and the room that I saw the chair in was not there. There had only ever been 2 parts of the basement, my dad said. I told him what I saw and how I knew there had to be some mistake. But I never did see that part of the basement again. I'm 18 now, and I decided to do some research on the house to see if there's any history that could have caused that. I came across an article of a man who had been arrested in 1868 for doing lab experiments on all of his children. After the man was arrested, the police found all 12 skeletons of his children stuffed behind the basement stairs, under debris and concrete. Now that I finally have moved out of that house, and that I finally have an answer as to what I saw that night, I am finally at peace. But those 5 words still hang over me to this day. Get out. Daddy is coming.
Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.